It is my delight to be hosting this amazing panel, this conversation on one of the most dynamic, although still uncertain, frontiers of global investing. Real estate. Today, capital is moving through a very different map. Shipping routes are being shifted, energy security is back in focus, and global partnerships are constantly being reshuffled and redrawn. So in this environment, we're all asking ourselves, how do investors find or identify risk and also, importantly, find opportunity and catch that opportunity before others do. So over the next 30 minutes, I'm hoping that we're going to add value and give you some answers here. We will explore how geopolitical risk and economic uncertainty are shaping real estate flows around the world and specifically in this region here, and what new strategies are emerging for growth, also for resilience, in a sector that is still the biggest, the world's biggest store of wealth. According to Savills, $400 trillion of that wealth is in real estate as of 2025. So we have a remarkable panel. You've met them. Let's dive right in. So on this morning's panel, the panelists evoked Tina again. They said that they would stay long in the United States, investing in the US, and also mentioned was that FDI in the United States was rising 29%. Notwithstanding the United States, globally FDI isn't doing that well this year. And I think in the first quarter of 2025, we've seen a drop of about 14% on a global level. So let's look at what's happening here in the region. Fadi, if I can start with you, and if you can tell us what is happening, if you tell us the state of interest in investing in the region from foreign investors.
Sure. Thank you, Cyba. And thank you for hosting me at this very exciting panel. Basically, what I would like to say is that the GCC governments have made it a top priority to attract FDIs into the region. And real estate is a big part of the flows of FDIs that go inbound and, of course, outbound. Let's talk about inbound because this is what we are all here to talk about. In terms of the GCC states, I think some of the jurisdictions are, I would say, more easy to underwrite than others, okay? And the UAE is probably the champion in the GCC in terms of the ease of underwriting. So when you're a foreign investor and you're looking at the Middle East and say this is a growth region, I would really want to, dip my toes in this area. Where do I start from? Very, very often, the UAE comes as the top priority. Why is that? It's because, first of all, UAE is seen as probably the best, the best pupil in the classroom, the most transparent market, the most liquid, and last but not least, it's the legal environment that offers foreign investor more comfort, more confidence, more stability. And all these do tick the boxes of third-time investors into the region. UAE certainly is the champion, and obviously Saudi Arabia, no one can ignore the powerhouse that it is and the fantastic opportunities that it offers for foreign investor. However, I would say Saudi Arabia real estate boom is starting now, whereas the UAE, it started probably 20 years ago, of course with cycle, but now the next big thing is definitely Saudi Arabia.
So if we speak of a slowdown in foreign direct investment flows, how slow is the slowdown?
I'm not sure we are reading the same statistics, really. I think for the moment, the way I see it is certainly not a slowdown. I increasingly see, in my day-to-day job, I increasingly see foreign investor, new names Chinese, Asian, Hong Kong, Singapore, American big PE company, very much focused on scouting investment opportunities in real estate in the GCC. So from my perspective, I don't see the region as being in a slowdown mode. On the contrary, it's a growth.
That's very comforting. So let me ask Awaiz, I see you nodding. You're seeing interest. Are we seeing commitment following that interest?
Yeah, so I mean, look, Fadi touched upon Saudi Arabia. And I would like to say that Saudi Arabia today is undergoing a massive transformation in the real estate sector. The kind of giga projects that have been announced are changing the face of Saudi Arabia as well as the region. And a lot of FDI is coming in, not in the levels that we want, but slowly and surely as regulations ease up, as rules and regulations become more transparent, a lot more is flowing into Saudi Arabia and into the region. And look, for investors, I think the giga projects are good for ambition, are good for brand building, but it's the plumbing of the transformation. You know, projects which are important for housing, healthcare, education facilities, and industrial warehouses, logistical assets. I think that is where investors will actually make money.
Sam, what interests you in the region at the moment? What would you be looking at?
So we are, we're based in the U.S., but we're real estate, like in the U.S., obviously a lot of the sectors in Saudi Arabia and the region that people are chasing are not sectors that we're looking at. You know, industrial and multifamily and a lot of these sectors in the U.S., they've compressed down and they're very institutional in many regards. And for us, you know, seeing the number of developers in Saudi that are very sophisticated and have experienced incredible returns, and same here in the UAE, we don't want to be behind. So we're looking at the entertainment space. Experiential real estate for us is really the next wave of investing, not only here, but in the US as well. We see, I mean, it's really, that's like the next generation, that's the focus, is experiential real estate. And we obviously, Saudi's maybe the most forward-thinking that we've seen across the world, or one of the most forward-thinking across the world, as well as the UAE, in terms of understanding the importance of entertainment and giving people experiences. I mean, look, Dubai in 2004, early 2000s, when they said they were going to become a financial center of the world, I think New York and London probably laughed, right? But they've done that because of everything that they've brought to the table. Yeah.
Bastien, what do you see as the next play in real estate? Then experience economy is what Sam has mentioned.
Well, for us, with a strong focus on tourism and hospitality, definitely the experiential investments are key. You look at the investments which are taking place, for instance, in the GCC, you're talking about investment in hospitality, which are pretty much showing growth. By 2026, I think it will be around 36 or 38 billion of hospitality, of revenue generated through hospitality assets. You're talking about a constant growth year over year of over 6%. You have assets, especially in hospitality again, which are able to generate IDRs, so average rates, and growth which are above inflation rates, so which is good as well for those investments. And when you're talking about experiential, there was recently in one of the main travel magazines a survey showing that 23% of the people are ready to pay up to 30% premium just to have an experiential element. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about experiential, it's not just a nice little design, but basically beside the revenue you can generate through the room, you generate a much stronger TREFPAR, so total revenue per available room, because you generate more revenue from the food and beverage outlets, you generate more revenue from the different experiences that you provide, beside the spas and other tours. So it's definitely what's to come next.
So would you say, I mentioned at the top geopolitical risks and the economy that not many people are able to make sense of at the moment. Do these pose as risks or as challenges? What does that do to investor appetite?
Well, for us, we are working mostly between the GCC and Pakistan. You look at the investment keeps on being quite strong. Yes, people are looking for countries where you have political and political stability as well as regulation stability, which are extremely important. When you were talking about the Giga project just before, those Giga projects are really showing the commitment of the local governments to support this type of investment. And definitely that builds the confidence for independent investors, as we are as well, to be part of the game.
But the nature of going back to FDIs, and the nature of FDIs has shifted, whereas it used to come into the region. Always, I'll ask you this, come into the region, into real estate, especially in the UAE, like Fadi mentioned. Now that money is going more towards infrastructure, renewables, technology, and maybe the real estate market, I'll just pose that as a question, is losing a major investor in the sovereign wealth funds that are really shifting more towards these new frontiers, if you like, or new sectors. So, Awaiz.
Sorry,
sorry, it's, the question is to you. Do you find that this shift into these new sectors is really depriving the real estate market, or is there enough to go?
No, I think there is an expansion, right? So if you go back in time, maybe 10, 15 years ago, the sovereign wealth funds were not generally investing locally. A lot of money, and I speak for Saudi Arabia, a lot of the Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund was historically always investing outside the country. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a dramatic shift where the wealth fund is now investing locally into the country and expanding the economy. And also the government regulations have kind of opened up the economy, and that I think there is an expansion. And of course, you know, when the wealth fund wants to invest across several sectors, then there may be a flavor of the month or a flavor of the year where a particular sector gets more funding. But overall, I would say that there has been an expansion of wealth being invested locally rather than being deprived.
So, Fadi, is that still at the level from the same investors, or has there been a widening of investor groups? Is private capital coming in more now that there is more space? Is there more space for private capital in real estate?
So the question
yes. Yeah. Yes. No, I was saying, is there space for private capital to step in and make up for any SWF investment that used to come into real estate and now is being diverted into AI or renewables, etc.?
Sure, absolutely. The governments cannot only count on their sovereign wealth fund and on their self-funding. There is an obsession with attracting private wealth from whether locally, from the domestic market, the regional or the international market. And this also comes and feeds into the FDI that we were talking about. Now, coming back to the question, I think the buzzword, Cyba, to your point, is very much infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we go to the, I would say, alternative asset classes in our real estate world, which are, to your point, data centers, logistics, self-storage, and all these emerging asset classes that are really the buzzword now. And I can tell you that beside the sovereign wealth fund in every GCC market, very much focusing on that, there is an awful lot of private wealth, private money, private investment that would like to gain exposure to these infrastructure segments, which are very much hugely undersupply and offer the best opportunity for not only private money, but also the sovereign money or the government money.
Sam, on opportunity and your mention of the entertainment or experience economy. Is that sustainable? Is that a trend that has just come in and it's after COVID and is perhaps peaking?
I think it's a total shift in just the overall demographics of the younger generations in general. I mean, in the U.S., for example, I mean, just taking a step back for a moment on the macro trends, you have whatever the number, 350 plus million people in the U.S., 75 million of those people are baby boomers who are retiring. The next generation that's going to inherit all of their wealth has a totally different mindset. Their parents didn't come out of World War II. They have a very different approach to life, and we're expecting entertainment real estate and entertainment demand in the U.S. to more than double over the next 5 years. So the U.S. is way behind, this region in terms of entertainment. I mean, obviously everybody's heard of Disney and Universal. There's some big concepts, but there's 100 cities in the U.S. that have very little in terms of entertainment offering. And the one thing that we're seeing in the U.S. is that cities are finally starting to see, like a lot of these economic development people in the U.S. cities, like they're traveling around the world and they're going like, oh wait, like we're losing out to Dubai and to Riyadh. They see what's happening in a lot of the Asian markets. And so driving that experience, and they're realizing in order to drive talent, in order to bring companies, they need to offer something to their people. And that's not going to change. I think that's going to accelerate over the next decade to 1 to 2 decades for sure.
So in a market where the traditional investment, the good yielding investment is a multi-family units, etc. How does this new trend, if you like, fare on yield?
So I think a lot of the institutional investors in the U.S. at least they're taking a very conservative approach right now, just given the status of the economy over there. So a lot of people are staying in yesterday's darlings, so kind of this last cycle. Obviously, office and condominiums and all the things that kind of blew up in 2008, and then obviously with COVID, office is kind of really struggling, but industrial, multifamily, self-storage, a lot of these things these are the buzzwords, but in a way, there's so much capital flow that's gone into those sectors that there's, in a way you're taking a different type of risk. And what I would see happening, especially as you start to see more stability in foreign markets, you'll probably see a lot more of that U.S. capital chasing yield that's comfortable with multi or comfortable with industrial or data centers, going like, okay, we can make a better yield if we go to the GCC region. Let's dabble our toes here.
Awaiz, are you enthused by the yields?
So
Still?
again, yeah, I mean, again, when we do an asset allocation strategy, right, there are different approaches. In certain markets, yes, we chase yields, but in certain markets, we chase predictability, we chase stability. So I think for us, when we diversify and we look at probably UK or US, we are chasing predictability rather than yields. Mm-hmm. And when we are investing in maybe Saudi or UAE, we are chasing yields.
Bastien, let me ask you about the mega projects, and because when we had a conversation, you mentioned your preference to secondary cities. So what is the opportunity there?
Well, when you're talking about foreign investment or even investment in general in tourism, everybody in the market usually starts, will it be in UAE or KSA, with the main cities and luxury projects. But actually, when you're looking at the actual returns that you can get, if you go towards mid-scale property, secondary, tertiary cities, there are some very interesting returns to do because the cost of construction of those properties are more limited, and the yield in that case it gets quite strong, which as an opposite to the economy that we mentioned before in terms of experiential. When you want to develop some experiential destinations, the investment can be quite heavy in remote locations, quite large resorts usually, or large properties, and those properties become kind of niche liquidity which are very difficult to have a proper exit strategy or a fast exit strategy. When you're developing properties which are more mid-scale, secondary, tertiary cities, there is this opportunity to exit from the investment as well within a shortened period and with more easiness.
Fadi, what do you think? Secondary cities, what's the supply like there?
Same challenges, I would say. If I had one criticism to do, is a little bit the same challenges is the liquidity of the market. Of course, when we talk about apartments and villa, yes, this trades a lot. But the minute you step up to commercial real estate, larger lot size, the volume that trade every year in the GCC are still very, very low compared to the scale of the real estate market that is there. So definitely the liquidity challenge is there. And this is why my company and other of our esteemed competitor are trying to improve, is basically to put more transparency, put more regulation, provide more comfort to people and liquidity, because whenever an investor considers an investment, the first thing he thinks about is the exit before the entry. Entry is easy. It's the exit that is challenging. And this is why sometimes we struggle to get deeds across the line.
Yeah, we talk about this. I mentioned the economy that very few of us are able to get our heads around these days because of so many moving parts, and not least of which is technology that's moving so fast. So to what extent is the future of real estate investing tied to technology, to maybe prop tech or smart buildings, etc.?
Totally interconnected. I want to cite one, I would say, shocking sentence that the CEO of Jones Lang LaSalle, who's still the CEO, said 15 years ago. He said, Jones Lang LaSalle, the future of Jones Lang LaSalle is a technology company with a focus on real estate. That was 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Before AI, before tokenization, before even cryptocurrencies. You see what I mean? So definitely real estate and technology have created a new industry which we call prop tech, in which we say there's going to be a lot of disruption going forward, and the disruption has very much started with so many new concepts that are now possible due to the technology available to us.
We've gone through most of the session. We have not mentioned governance once, and I would like to talk a little bit about governance and what does the market look like. Sam, do you feel that the markets here in the GCC are well regulated or regulated enough to give you comfort to come into those markets full on? Sam?
They are. I mean, we're still, in all candor, we are still understanding or getting kind of a better understanding of how the regulations, how everything works, how transactions work. But we've been very surprised, I guess, by the amount of structure that does exist, and a lot of the uncertainty is really just perception. So that's been a very kind of eye-opening experience over the last several months that we've been really diving in pretty deeply. Yeah. And I think that's going to become, as more and more big managers, particularly, I guess they're kind of, Dubai seems to be the first stop for a lot of the big managers. But even I saw Starwood. Once Starwood comes in, they're bringing their real estate obviously at some point too. So more of these U.S. managers are going to come in, and then that brings the institutional capital, from the U.S. as well.
Awaiz, we talked about there is interest in the region, but there aren't as many commitments as there is interest. Is there room to improve on governance? Is there room to improve on regulation?
Of course, there is always room for improvement, right? And I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of improvement, a lot of changes in the regulations, transparency. I think the government has kind of realized in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and in other jurisdictions that institutionalization always helps. And when you have transparent regulations, when you have adequate governance mechanisms, it becomes much more easier to attract capital. And I think that learning is now upon us, and governments are taking that step to ensure that the regulations and transparency improve. And of course, there is always room for improvement, but I think we are on the right path. And this will show in the next couple of years as we mature.
Is geopolitical risk a deterrent anyway when you're thinking about investing in this region, Bastien?
Us, definitely we're thinking about investing. Just to come back to the previous point, you have the rules are getting clearer everywhere in terms of labor regulations, in terms of visa exemption or access, in terms of ownership rights as well, which are good signs for the investors, definitely. When you look at the confidence that we can have in the markets, definitely there are lots of opportunities. But to come back to the exit strategy, most of the people who are not from the region are very attracted by the region, but they always think about an exit strategy because of something that was mentioned a bit earlier today during the session with Mr. Pompeo, which was the sentiment. So the challenge that we have very often in the region is that you have lots of people who want to come, but at the same time, because of whatever happens or whatever they see on TV, straight away there is a sentiment of, I need to be able to go and exit quickly in case of. But this in case of most of the time doesn't come because we have quite stable markets in a way.
I want to mention that Saudi Arabia recently took a step towards freezing rent increases, which is something that Dubai did a few years ago as well. What do you feel about that, Fadi? Does that serve the market? Does that help? What lessons are there from Dubai's step?
Definitely, Dubai has pioneered that I would say new real estate market since the international freehold came into play. And of course, like everything, there is growing pain, and the market has gone through cycles. But then this is the sign of maturity. The cycles are less and less violent, and this is another sign that the market is maturing. The UAE on the real estate transparency index that we do is, as I said, the best child in the classroom. Saudi Arabia is certainly there and doing all what it takes in order to provide that confidence, stability, governance to attract the people. And therefore, I would say this is a journey and it's going to take some time, and there is always room to improve, to your point, but we are definitely on the right track.
But freezing rents for a period of 3 years, does that attract or repel investors?
No, I think, look, a mature investor understands this. We've seen in the UK, there have been rent controls in the past. We've seen in India, in Bombay, when, in the 1970s and 80s, there was rent control. So a mature investor looks at this, and of course, there is some hesitation and you have to accommodate your strategy. But, when a mature when a mature investor looks at this, there are other ways to mitigate something like rent control. Fadi is smiling because I know he understands that landlords will always find a way to get around rent control.
Yeah, Sam, did you find that a step like that was useful in the United States?
Well, look, it hasn't really worked. I mean, in the U.S., it's never really worked, but to your point, like investors, look, there's plenty of investors in New York City that are investing in apartments, despite all the rent control that hasn't worked in LA and all the different markets. But you can still make money, you can still do well. It doesn't really work for the overall situation. It's a supply and demand issue ultimately.
Right. Well, thank you all very much. This was very, very fast. We had so much to go through. I hope we touched on most of points that may be running questions in your heads. Real estate must deliver utility and experience and not just capital appreciation. Investors demand resilience, flexibility, and adaptability over just pure speculative plays. We talked about regulatory clarity, which is crucial for scaling investment in GCC real estate and also crucial for attracting FDI. I thank you again for joining me this evening. And thank you all, and I wish you a very, very good evening.